All right, we're going to go ahead and get started, and I would like to thank everyone who is on the other side of this webinar. This is going to be a great time to talk about the ways that digital media and digital marketing are influencing the world of digital politics and other things as well. My name is Brent Comstock, and I'm joined here by Maddy Hager from our team, and we'll do a brief introduction in a minute of ourselves, but we are going to first begin by talking very briefly about BCom Solutions. So we invited you all here, or you found us in some way or another. Our company is based in Nebraska with offices in Lincoln and Auburn, Nebraska, and we consider ourselves an action-oriented digital marketing company, largely because of the work that we do both in political campaigns, but also in work in other areas as well. And you can see here down below that we both enjoy working with great customers, and we also enjoy having a really good time with one another as well. And we think that that company culture is a large part of the way that we're able to deliver success as well to our clients and candidates. So my name is Brent Comstock. I am the CEO and founder of BCom Solutions, and at our team I predominantly lead our sales group, and also I work on strategy as well. We thought it would be fun to talk about weird hidden talents that our team has, and in the past year I have sent some dozen or so emails that are completely coherent while fully asleep. So if that doesn't freak you out and make you sign off of the webinar, I don't know what will. And now I'll let Maddy introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Maddy Hager. I am the digital strategist here at BCom. So what that means is that I help plan out our clients' campaigns. If Jane Doe is running for city election, she'd come to us and I would help put together the digital strategy and the plan for her campaign going forward. I also do content management. And my hidden talent sounds a little bit weird, but let me explain. My parents are probably Toyota brand ambassadors on the low. I'm sure they haven't informed me of that, but they've driven Toyotas my entire life to the point, and I own a Toyota too, where if I'm walking through a parking garage and I hear a car turn on or I'm in a parking lot, I can guess if it's a Toyota or not, and I'm usually almost always right. So that's my hidden talent.
And if that didn't make you sign off of the webinar, then I really don't know what will. So before we dig in, I think it's important to talk about the goals for today. First of all, I hope that we end by, we will definitely end before 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time, so within the hour. For those of you that are joining or have colleagues that may not be able to make it, we will have a recording of this that we will share bits and pieces of. Some of the things we go through might not be very easy to share, or is something that's probably better suited for conversation. At the end, we will share those resources with you. We will share you the link to the slide deck, and we will also share with you some resources that we're going to talk about throughout today's session. So the first component that we're going to talk about is the why in digital politics. I think that the buzz right now in the industry is always about Facebook ads and targeting and retargeting and Russia, but we want to talk about why, and then we want to talk about how this has evolved. Digital politics is something fairly new in terms of the marketing and political space that recently evolved over the last 10 to 15 years. Then I will go through some of the key digital components that need to be included in any campaign, and then Maddy will talk about a little bit about social media and the idea of community management and engagement. Then the final piece will be really targeted on fundraising for all campaign sizes. And of course, we'll take questions at the end as well. I also think it's important for you to know what not to expect, or if you're looking for one of these things, we're probably not going to get involved in it in this hour. Number one, we're not going to recommend a specific platform or product. So for those of you that are looking to beta test a couple of platforms, we will be having some upcoming webinars about that, but that is not our objective today. Our objective is primarily to talk about social media and email and how that integrates with all other aspects of the campaign. We're also not going to give you a sales pitch. We will include our emails at the end of the presentation, but other than that, we're not going to talk about why our company is the best. Really, we're going to inform you about how you can do a lot of this yourself. For those of you that know our company or have been associated with our company, you know that we do not claim to be the conservative or the progressive digital agency. A lot of our work tends to lean in the moderate space, and from a campaign area, we tend to work on moderate to left campaigns, and from a corporate aspect, we tend to work with moderate to right corporations. So we're not going to be playing party politics here. Really because the digital aspect is something that any candidate, independent, Republican, Democrat, can take advantage of. And then the final two things, we don't want to put you to sleep. So if we happen to do that, there's a chat and a Q&A feature. I think you can use both of those simultaneously in the webinar, and we'll be paying attention to those. So if you have something that you'd like to share with the larger group, you can share that in the chat. And then if you have a question, we'll do Q&A at the end, but Maddy will be moderating this throughout the webinar. So if you have a question that you want the whole group to share or have access to, you can ask that. And if you have a one-on-one question, we'll also be monitoring that throughout the webinar. And with that, I'm going to move right into kind of the why aspect. So all day long, I get an opportunity to pitch digital solutions to campaigns and causes, but I think it takes a step back to really understand why so many people are obsessed with this, and also why 60 Minutes a couple of weeks ago they were sharing information about President Trump's digital team. That would not have happened 10 years ago, largely, or 15 years ago, largely because the Obama campaign was the first in 2008 was really the first digital candidate. But now in 2016 and 17, 68% of millennials regard social media as their primary source of news. And for those of you that stay up on age trends, millennials are no longer the current generation. It's actually centennials. So the millennial generation that has recently just kind of peaked, a large majority of them are not using social media necessarily just to send funny pictures of themselves and their friends, but they're actually using it to consume media. And if that doesn't compel you to look at digital, the average person, not the average social media addict or the average texting addict, but the average person looks at their phone 2,617 times a day. And if you're wondering where the credibility is in this, in the slides that we send, I included all of these sources, I promise. But 2,617 times. And the addict, for those of you that would say I can't put my phone down and I'm pretty much always on it, that number can span from 5 to 10,000 times a day. Now, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that was not the case. Therefore, digital was not a media that people really looked at. Now, if you ignore it, you're ignoring about 70% of the millennial population, and you're missing out on 2,617 times per person in the United States of a way to engage them, whether it's a text message or an email or a social media post. The other thing to think about is the way in which this industry has progressed. And so in 2004, in 2000, and in 96, and 90, in 92, and all these different years in off elections, the previous medium was to go broadcast to person. So it was a news outlet going to a person. It was a press release from a campaign going to a person. It was someone maybe knocking on doors was the most peer-to-peer interaction, but it was largely large audience to you individually in a mass form. Now everything is peer-to-peer. I often compare the work that we do with Amazon. People expect to see and feel and have it look exactly like they want it to, because people go on Amazon every day and are amazed when they see that their shopping cart is still there and the suggested products are actually things they might be interested in. So that idea of peer-to-peer is really important. When you're thinking about digital and thinking about the ways in which you might want to engage with your campaigns or your clients, if it's not personalized, it's not worth your time. And this is a perfect point and a perfect opportunity to talk about who this webinar is for. So if you're on the line and you're a lobbyist, this is great because this can inform your candidates or the groups that you lobby on behalf of in how do they build a digital advocacy engine. And Maddy will talk a little bit more about content curation and how you do that fairly in a fairly lean model in a little bit. If you're a candidate running for office, this is perfect for you because a lot of the tips that we're going to share will be tips that you can use for yourself. For those of you that are working on behalf of a campaign or you're helping a friend and not getting paid, we feel you, but these are also great resources for you as well, and things that you can do to really help either your friend, family member, or client really succeed. Now, for a little bit of fun, because I don't want to put people to sleep, I took the leisure of bringing up George W. Bush's presidential campaign website in 2004. Now, I would like you all to brace yourselves, and I cannot see your faces, but I would be curious to see what you think of when you see this. So for those of you that have any immediate reactions or comments, feel free to add those in the chat. Appropriate only, please. But the interesting thing about this is what digital looked like in 2004. And Maddy and I both agree that things have evolved slightly, a little bit. But for the most part, this was digital. And I want to point out just a few things. Number one, we're going to talk about objectives in a minute. I don't know that it's obvious, but I don't know what the objective is on this site. You might see that there is a volunteer option, and you can be a Bush volunteer. And right to the left, or to the right of that, excuse me, you can see the donate button. Now think about the emails that you received in 2016 and the intensity of getting people to vote and to donate. In the top left-hand corner, you will see these really sexy icons that include blog, donate, action center, vote, and W stuff, as Maddy has previously coined it. That W stuff really was the shopping cart that would take you to buy a shirt or a banner or postcard. As you can see, there is no design concept in here. What's interesting, though, is that this was the extent of digital in the campaign. Now, this is not, we could have equally showed a Kerry website in the same way. It was not much better. This is not me bashing the Bush-Cheney ticket. Obviously, something worked for them. I don't think it was their digital strategy. But then the evolution is more important. So we go from this, where everything is just layered on top of one another, and we switch to something like this. Social media evolves. 2004 to 2008 was huge for digital media in general. We're not even going to show the Barack Obama website, but just the idea of going out of a website platform that the campaign controlled and being able to rely on something like this was really, really empowering. We're not going to talk about all the effects of the digital team from 2008 and 2012. We will share a few things, but the most important part is that several years ago, I remember hearing a politician running for office saying that they wanted to get out of the campaign speeches and get onto the campaign trail and visiting people. Similarly to churches or organizations that say they want to get out of the building and where their constituents or congregation members are at, or something like that. That's what happened here. Is the evolution from 2004 to 2008 was really, we need to go where the people are at, and not we need to build this mega engine where we're only communicating information one direction. Now, that doesn't mean that the Obama campaign moved away from the website. Largely what they moved to was the idea of an experience versus a visit. And here's an example of what that meant. So these are 2012 statistics that are again cited at the bottom in the notes when we give you access to the slides. But just the idea of building upon this. So in 2012, $690 million was raised online. And that was 40% roughly more than 2008. And we won't go into the statistics of what 2004 and 2000 look like. There were 4.4 million online donors that were new to the Obama organization in 2008, or in 2012, excuse me. And then there were 49% increase in conversions on forms. For those of you that work in marketing or do anything with maybe email marketing or have any knowledge of conversion rates in politics, a 40% increase in conversions when the conversions were already pretty high to begin with is quite astronomical. And that's why our company exists now, is that this has evolved into something that is going to continue to grow. So in 2016, and whether you were a fan of 2016 or not, I think we were all slightly confused, is probably the most appropriate word. It's not going anywhere. In 2018, in the midterm elections, where there is no presidential election, it's expected that the digital advertising spending industry is going to go from about 1 billion to 2 billion. And then in 2020, we're going to reach 3 billion, 3.3 billion roughly. And I think that's something it's telling, and it's more of a get on board or get out of the way. And our company has an opportunity to work with down-ballot candidates that usually we're not selling them against another company. Usually what we're selling them on is the idea that they actually need this. And when we show this statistic to people, people generally go, that's interesting. Maybe I should sign up now. And whether you're signing up with a company, a digital firm, or doing it yourself, the biggest thing that I can tell you is that if you don't have this, someone else is going to, on the opposite side likely, is going to build a profile on your behalf. And you're probably going to not like what you're seeing from that aspect. So now we're going to move on to, that's kind of where everything has evolved, and how things have evolved into the conversation that we have now. And I think that it's really important to look now at how does this affect you as the candidate or you as someone involved in politics. This is a model that the sources in the bottom here that was used during the Barack Obama campaigns, but it's a model that every digital agency has adopted since, and it's a model that campaigns generally overlook when looking at the digital landscape. So while everything is going away from a website and going to social media and going to Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat and all these different areas, it's really important to understand the one thing that still remains true about a campaign website. Whether it's BarackObama.com, whether it's HillaryClinton.com, DonaldTrump.com, whatever it may be, it's that they own that experience. You go on Facebook, you go on Twitter, you go on Instagram, you go on all these different places. The candidate and the campaign, they control maybe the messaging that goes out, but if Facebook decides that they want to get rid of their news feed, there's nothing that a state race or a governor race or even likely a presidential race can really do to say, hey, I don't want you to do that. But with a campaign website, the information is 100% controlled by the candidate and the campaign. Aside from if the entire internet collapses, which could happen nowadays, but that's where all of this comes to play. The objective at the bottom is to have an exceptional experience, and we're going to talk about experience throughout the rest of this webinar. Maddy is going to talk about the way in which you give an experience to people that are interacting with your candidate's social media presence, but this is the big objective. All of these little pieces together are designed to deliver to you an exceptional customer experience. Customer should be exchanged for the word candidate, but since we know we have people on here that are from a variety of different spectrums, we didn't want to just say candidate. So we're not going to go through each of these. In future webinars, we're going to dig into some things that largely relate to each one of these. So we're going to talk about the idea of viral video. We're going to talk about search and online display ads. But for today's webinar, what we're largely going to work on is looking at this idea centered around how does this in the entire experience come together. And it's really broken into three different segments: the customer acquisition, the engagement, and the analytics. So the acquisition is the way in which we're driving people to the website. The engagement is the way in which we're going to keep them engaged and perpetually involved in these different elements. And the analytics are the ways in which we're going to assess whether we did well or not, what we can change, what we can improve, and how we go about that. When we talk about digital channels, there are an infamous number. For those of you that are wondering if you are interested in what are the things that you should take advantage of in this webinar, here's a slide that would be of value to you. If your campaign, whether you're running for state school board or whether you're running for president, Congress, or governor, you should have all of these things. We've italicized social media and email systems because we're going to talk about that today for the most part. But if your campaign does not have a website, if you don't have a text messaging system, if you don't have analytics on every single thing you're doing, and a contact database, and a strategy for paid media, then you're immediately behind. And that's one of the objectives of our webinar today, is that you will recognize that some of these things are so easy. It's not difficult to set up an email system. You can use things like MailChimp or ActiveCampaign if you're looking to go on the lower end of the budget, and you can use things like Nation Builder if you're looking to really integrate with a larger database system. These things altogether, though, are can lead to messes like this. This is an example of how we're using Nation Builder for a couple of campaigns that we're working on. And when you put all those together, people generally have a feeling like this, which is not all that different than some of the feelings we have in our office sometimes. But before we begin, and if you're looking at that going, I'm running for state legislature and I don't have time to manage email, social media, text message, online donations, fundraising, and a website, we're going to help you out with that. So first is building a strategy, then it's identifying those tools, and then it's the idea of assessing and repeating that. So we're going to start with the strategy piece. There are 3 ways that you should look at building a digital strategy for your campaign. You can go online and look at marketing strategies, you can look at campaign strategies, and you will find a million graphics, you'll find a million different ideas, but it really boils down to 3 key things. What are the objectives, which is surprisingly difficult for a large group? How do you assess where you're at, and more importantly, where your opposition's at? And number 3, how are you going to get the job done with resources? On the subject of objectives, I'm not going to read through this certainly, but our objective with digital has nothing to do with building another entity that's siloed out in a campaign team. I tell all of the candidates that we work with, and our team adamantly believes that digital should have a role at the decision-making table, or it shouldn't be involved at all. And I think that's really, really key, is because many people see digital and Twitter and social media as the press secretary online, and that's how digital fails. Digital is fundraising, digital is grassroots, digital is field, digital is operations and communications. And that's what our company strongly believes, and we share that with campaigns all the time, because we'll have someone that comes to us and says, I want to get involved, and they'll say, build some Facebook ads. And digital is a lot more than that. At the end of the day, though, there are 5 primary objectives in a campaign, with 3 really big ones. First of all, the 3 ones at the end, I think, is self-explanatory, but when we sit down with candidates, or when we go back to candidates after they've started their race, we find that they're deviating from these. So if you're starting a campaign right now, you need to grow your email list. That's a large portion of what we'll talk about in the second half of this webinar. If you're running for office and you're just building your platform, you need to grow your social following. Whether you are Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, or whether you are announcing for the first time that you're going to run for a municipal race, there is always room to grow that social following. But at the end of the day, there are 3 key objectives that you want. You want to get volunteers to help you with your campaign, to knock on doors, to go around your neighborhood, to go to events and parades with you. You want to raise money. I would be astounded if someone shared with me that they were a candidate and didn't want to raise money. And you want to win. And marketing has this, and the word marketing, and where our company tries to be a little bit careful, is marketing has this aura about the industry that we always ask for more, We're always trying to increase our budget, and then we're always trying to shoehorn results at the end to make it look like we won in some capacity. The beauty of politics and campaigns is that you can see if you've won or not. And it's very obvious to you, and it's very obvious to everyone else. And I think that is a really important piece. If you're a candidate, or if you are a lobbyist, or if you're someone that's supporting someone running for office, and you don't have these objectives listed by every single digital piece that you're sending out, then you're behind. And this is a great opportunity to realign those. To dig into the three biggest ones a little bit more so that you don't think I'm just rambling about these. Number one is voting. And it's not just a matter, excuse me, of posting vote, 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 vote for me, vote for my friends, vote for other people. It's a matter of building get out the vote vehicles. One of those vehicles could be building a Facebook event that you drive a lot of traffic towards that has nothing to do with your campaign. Maybe it's just vote in Lancaster County here in Nebraska. Maybe it's vote in DC. Maybe it's African Americans voting for this. Maybe it is millennials supporting a certain candidate. Building those events and driving traffic towards those events that you have, whether you're using paid media or just doing it organically, that's really important. I think a lot of times people think our get out the vote strategy is to post 75 times on our candidate's social media about mobilizing. That's not the case. Maddy will talk a little bit more about that content piece and how to build that community as well. The donate piece, the key word here is integrated. All of those systems that we shared with you before and on that whiteboard picture that we shared with you, it's very entertaining to me how many people have all of these things set up, but there is no talking between the systems. You don't need $1 million tech machine and digital infrastructure to run and be successfully elected at any level of office, frankly. It obviously helps, but the idea that you have one system for email and one system for social media and one system for donations just means that you're not going to be able to provide that experience that people are wanting. And then the third component that I will leave kind of at your leisure to dig into on your own a little bit more is that we can engage audiences in a way that's entirely different. Our company does a lot of work with rural communities and specifically rural candidates. And the thing I tell our candidates all the time is if you're running for Senate in Nebraska or governor, or if you're running for state treasurer, you can go throughout the entire state in an election cycle. That's certainly doable. I think you can do that in every state, but you can't talk to every single human being for an hour. On digital, there are ways we certainly can't do that for an hour, but we can reach people in ways that might not have been able to been reached before, and largely in rural communities. And I think a lot of times people are surprised by how effective digital and rural combined are. The second piece is the audit component. And before you begin, if you're running for something, or even if you are a nerd like me and you like to assess people that aren't our customers and aren't our candidates, I just like to know what people are doing. The beauty about politics is that everything is public, whether it's their financial disclosures, whether it's their social media presence. You can sign up for their emails. You can sign up for all sorts of different things. And I think that that's really important for people to understand is where does that fine line exist. Opposition is even more important. How many people are visiting the candidate's website? How many people are searching for the candidate? If you want to know where your candidate ranks in the world of online media, Google it. Because while all of you are probably more civically minded and informed citizens, a lot of people, the day of election, will be pressured into voting, and they will go online and they will type in Governor, Nebraska, enter. They'll type in Auburn, Nebraska, mayor, enter. And I find that amusing and also kind of disturbing that one of the things that our company wants to do is simply inform people more. It's not for any one candidate. It's not for any one party. It's the idea that people don't understand why they need to vote for their water utility district representative. And that's something that I think is important, and I think that should be looked at from the candidate's perspective amongst other things. The final piece that I'm going to talk about before I turn it over to Maddy for a little bit is talking about resources. Resources that we've already talked about, the channels in which you can communicate: Facebook, Twitter, website, emails, whatever it may be. That's great. But the resources are the people the time, and kind of just the idea that you're going to invest in this in one way or another. So number one, as it relates to design and copy and photography and videography, invest in good design. That doesn't mean that it has to be expensive. On the right-hand side, we showed how for a State Board of Education candidate that was successfully elected, we promoted and got involved with sharing graphics and pictures of those people that were supporting her. That consistency led to people really seeing that candidate as very authentic, but also very real. And while that's not the only thing that helped get this candidate elected, it was critical in understanding that this was coming from the campaign and that it was an official communication. If you're only using text, or if you're only doing maybe regular tweets, or maybe you have a templated website, it's hard for people in their minds to recognize brand authenticity. The other thing you need to evaluate is agency support and time. Not every candidate has the budget for an agency like BCom Solutions, although we try and tailor our work to the down ballot races. For those of you that are running for smaller cycle races, we try and tailor that. But sometimes there are people that are just trying to get started and they literally have $0. It's still important to allocate time to digital. I think a lot of times we go, oh, we'll just hop on Twitter when we're in the car, and then we forget it. If you're a candidate, or if you're helping a candidate, whether you're paid or not, allocate at least 2 hours a week to just doing digital. If you're running actively for something like city council and it's election year, I would recommend an hour a day. The beauty is that you can do that hour at midnight, you can do that hour at 12 at noon, you can do that hour whenever you want. But when you do that, you understand more of the constituency. And the social part of social media is the conversation. Maddy's going to talk about that conversation as it relates to some of the work we've done. And she's also going to explore some of the stuff we've done with our grassroots digital organizing team. So I'm going to turn it over to her to talk a little bit more about that.
All right, so I'm going to talk about what makes effective community management and why it's important. A lot of this might sound sort of like social media 101, but it always bears repeating, I find. So what makes good community management, and what is community management? Well, community management is basically how you interact with your online audience. So what makes for good community management are the things I have listed on the slide. So we're going to break those down and talk about important components to each of those. So good community management is timely. That means if you are John Smith and you're running for city council and someone asks a question on how do you feel about raising taxes to build a new library, don't wait 10 days to respond to that constituent. You want to respond as soon as you can. If you don't feel like you can discuss that sort of response within the threshold of social media, a reply, go ahead and ask for that person's email in a private message. Take the conversation offline and show that person that you care about what they're saying. That shows that you are involved. Or if your campaign manager does it, it shows that they're involved. One thing I always think about is that, and this relates to everything on this slide, but people might not always remember what you said to them, but they will always remember how you made them feel. So as pithy as that sounds, it is absolutely true. And getting into that leads to talking about conversational community management. And what that means is that you don't want to sound like a robot. You also don't want to sound like you are constantly sending auto replies to people. So, even if someone comments on, let's say we'll just make this up. Let's say one of your big parts of your campaign is how much you love dogs. Well, if someone comments on a post and says, John Smith, I don't like dogs. They're gross. They smell weird. I love cats. They're better. It's better to have a conversation with that person than giving them an auto response that says something along the lines of, thank you for submitting your question. We will get back to you when we can. Make it personal. Say, thank you, random commenter, whatever your name is. I appreciate your honesty and your forthright comment on how you feel about my platform on dogs. Again, you want them to really see the candidate. You don't want them to see what they feel like is a wall of people preventing them from talking with the candidate. And that leads into talking about making sure your presence is professional. when you are campaigning and you're using social media as a resource or any sort of digital, you want to treat this as a business venture in the sense that how you respond or react to people is a direct extension of your campaign's voice. So that means if someone replies to an email you sent out, for fundraising, saying you're an idiot and they hate you and they don't ever want to help you get elected to office, as tempting as it is to unleash on them and correct them and let them know how wrong they are, you're better off just being as professional as you can. So in that instance, what I would suggest is thanking them for their honesty and leaving it at that. There's no need to get into any sort of war, especially on platforms like Twitter, because there are always trolls. There are people who are looking for a fight. And that's true on a lot of social media platforms, unfortunately. With some of our candidates that are currently running for office, we've seen that on Facebook. People that are just completely spamming posts with things that are unrelated to the messaging we're trying to put out. So in that instance, you have to weigh, well, should I allow them to keep doing this or do I block them? And I would suggest blocking them for the sake of keeping your messaging intact. So what do we mean when we say proactive and reactive community management, and how are they different? Well, proactive community management involves using digital as a means to try and connect with new constituents. It's a way that you can use social media and other aspects of digital to gather information on your constituents and on potential competition, as Brent said, for auditing. Proactive is seeing that, maybe Jane Doe has shared a post of yours and she praises you and says she can't wait to vote for you. Well, you could go ahead and comment on that, thanking Jane. That's proactive. It's making sure that social media is not one-sided. It never should be. Social media is very much meant to be a conversation, and that goes into other aspects of digital as well. I think that ties into emails in the sense that you don't want your content for emails, or really your content for anything, to sound automated again. And I think that you should use your content as your voice. Consider that your voice on digital. Your words have power, so use it. Now, reactive community management is, again, it's just replying to people. It's making them feel heard. And I think that goes into the conversational nature of social media, like we said. If I go ahead and see that someone has said something negative, again, that ties into being professional. Take it offline. But don't be afraid to respond to people. I think that when people fail to respond to constituents or people that are commenting on their social platforms, it comes off as a lack of interest, and you don't want to be that way. So an example of that I have is that one of our clients is running for office, and I was checking their messages on their page, and I had noticed that we had gotten a message from someone who was interested in volunteering. And we had responded to this person and just, basically said, thank you for your message. We will try and get back to you as soon as we can. And, this guy didn't think that we got back to him soon enough. So he sent us a pretty angry message saying that he thought that our fundraising efforts weren't going well and there wasn't a turnout, and that we should know how one side of the aisle feels about our campaign, and it's not good. So using all of the things I've talked about here for effective community management, rather than getting angry at this guy or saying, yeah, whatever, man, and brushing him off, I took the time to actually talk with him. And in that instance, I, of course, didn't say, my name's Maddy, I'm from BCom Solutions, here's my email and my social security number, text me anytime. But I did sit down with him and talk and try to make him feel heard. I think that is so important when you are being reactive to anything on digital or social media. And what ended up happening was this guy had said, well, I haven't heard from your campaign at all. I was able to go into the back end of one of our websites where we have a database of emails and see that actually he had seen every email we had sent to him and opened it. So when I brought that up, his tone kind of changed. It became less accusational. He then said, well, I was expecting a phone call. And I just said, at this point, if we appreciate that you want to help, we appreciate your enthusiasm, and here's how you can help. And this ties into utilizing digital grassroots advocacy. So with this particular man, I was able to say, you know what, with this candidate, we actually don't have boots on the ground as far as volunteering goes yet, because we're so early into the campaign. But one of the most helpful things you can do right now is be a digital advocate. for the person running for office. And what that means is taking to social media, taking to digital platforms, and sharing why you plan on voting for this candidate, why they're important to you, why their message awakens something in you. And what is so good about digital grassroots advocacy is that it's low commitment with a really high yield. So people are more than happy to share things on Facebook, but not everyone is willing to go knock on doors at 8 a.m. on a Sunday. So we've used that in past campaigns as well, as far as starting a digital grassroots team. And in that, we would send them weekly emails and say, hey team, here's what we need from you this week. We need you to post this. We need you to go ahead and read this article, let people know what you think. And we would encourage them to use certain hashtags. Now, we did weekly calls with those people as well as the emails. And so utilizing digital grassroots advocacy is a means to put digital to work for you, in the sense that you are getting people to volunteer and speak out for your campaign.
Great. Thanks, Maddy. So what we're going to do in the last portion, and we'll leave about 10 minutes at the end for questions. So for those of you that might have to hop off early, we only have about 5 to 10 more minutes of content. So if you do have questions, feel free to shoot those over to us in the chat or on social media as well. What we're going to talk about and we're going to dig into now is the idea of email and ways to groom your email that delivers results. And email is something that I think it's so entertaining to me, but it's also so effective. We're going to do an email fundraising workshop specifically that's not a webinar that's not just for candidates, but also for nonprofits and for a lot of other organizations. So please note that we're not going to go too in the weeds on this, but we're going to talk about some tactics that you should look at. So email is the constant engagement tool. It's the fundraising tool. It's the communication tool in terms of getting the largest number of opens when you want to share significant content. Text messaging, which we're not going to go into today, has a 99% open rate. But email itself is still the staple in the industry. And I think it's 90% of adults in the United States have email. That number has not changed in quite some time, and the engagement level and the way in which they use email has also not changed. So one of the things in a goal that should be identified is building some sort of list. So we put statewide list of supporters here for those of you that are running for a state office. It's important, whatever office you're running for, that you don't just build a list that's specific to maybe a specific group, or maybe you say, I've got this list, it has 4,000 people, there are 5,000 people in my district, so I'm done. It's really worth building that list that reaches all of your supporters. In terms of ways to look at email fundraising, I call this step 0 because if you don't have this, then you're basically out of luck. And this is the funnel and the way in which you should engage with the list. And I think it's very entertaining to me, the amount of companies that exist that specifically live to groom email lists. So these are the steps that you want someone on your list to take as they are engaging with you. So let's say you're running for office. Brent Comstock is running for this office. The first thing is the awareness of the campaign. We want someone to find our emails. We want them to see our pop-up. We want them to see and become aware of what we're doing. They need to know who is running and what they're running for, and that they have the option to contribute to our campaign, whether it's contribute by giving us an email or contribute by actually donating. And that's important because I think a lot of times people immediately lead to, how do I get all these emails, without asking the question of, how many places can I spread my sign-up form? And that's really powerful. When we work with candidates, we ensure that every single thing that they do, every printed material, every piece of content, every piece of social media has some option to know that this is a candidate that's running for something. Whether it's signing up for an email or doing something else, they have to be aware. The second piece is that you want to acquire their data. That's the magic. Get their name, their email, and their phone number. Here is a pro tip. If you are collecting their information, you should collect as much as you need in the beginning. Don't expect like, oh, we're not ready for text messaging, so we don't need it right now. Collect their cell phone numbers in the beginning, and check with your state and federal laws for SMS opt-ins. Email is pretty loose in terms of of how many people you can email without getting in any legal trouble. And I would encourage you to seek counsel on that. But text messaging is very explicit. They have to give their phone number and they have to check a box, whether it's in pen and paper or whether it's online, as it relates to giving that number and information. The third component is to activate them as a supporter. Activating them as a supporter does not mean they're giving you money. It means that they are opening your emails. It means that they are maybe sharing a tweet or a post or some sort of content. The fourth portion is to retain them. And that's where after 5 emails sent out, you can ask the question, have we retained these people? Who dropped off? Because the people that are still there are going to be the ones that are going to complete step 5. The ones that have completed the cycle, they've learned about you, they've learned about your issues, they're supporters of yours, they've given you their information. Now they feel more comfortable in warming up to giving a donation. And then I think a lot of times people see that as the end. But if you're looking at this as a funnel, which I am not artistically inclined enough to build this on my own, so I just did lists instead. But if you're looking at this as a funnel, the bottom portion where the funnel flips and becomes larger going down instead of from kind of the top down and then it turns over, that portion is when they start encouraging others to join. And when that happens, you know that you have validation and you should feel good about the digital strategy that you're employing. After step 0 is step 1, logically, and that's just getting the list engaged. The hot topic or the big conversation is, where do I buy my list from? Who has the best list? How much money do I throw at them? I like to compare buying a list to buying a pre-made cake, which many people would say, oh, that's not that bad. But it's a pre-made cake from Walmart that's been sitting on the shelf for about a week, and the expiration date is tomorrow. It might be really good. It might be excellent. But it will probably only last for a day. And it might be awful from the beginning. And it's really, really hard to identify that. Even if the person that you're getting the list from, or the company, or the wherever you're getting this list, even if they say very clearly that it's the best list, it has high open rates, that doesn't mean it's going to have high open rates for you. As such, you should try and avoid buying lists at all costs. And I mean at absolute all costs. And it's hard because that's what is entailed in this process. The second component is the idea of leveraging personal connections to build active engaged lists. I'm going to talk about a few hacks in a minute, but if you are related to someone, which I would imagine all of you are, that's a huge opportunity to get access to their contacts. And if you are afraid of asking those people for their lists, then you should not be running for office. A lot of times people go, oh, well, I don't want to involve my spouse, or I don't want to involve my kids. If they have data and information, I'm sorry, and I'm happy to be the bad guy here, but you can't afford to not collect that. So spouses, parents, children, grandchildren, cousins, people that are relevant in the industry. Maybe it's someone that is an elected politician in another state. That still provides information and value to you as a candidate, whether they're in your state or not. Then the other component is that every campaign is a sign-up opportunity, every component of the campaign. Every event, every opportunity, every parade you go to, every which way direction, it's all a sign-up opportunity. And if you're not asking people to sign up, then you're probably missing out. Here are a few hacks that you can take away for your list. Number 1, LinkedIn allows you to export your contacts as you would export them from a database. It's beautiful. It works wonderfully. I'm hesitant to share that with people, but it's so easy. I'll let you Google how to do that. It's not rocket science. It's kind of embedded in the settings of LinkedIn. But that's where we always go to get those first contacts, because it includes their names, their emails, their jobs, where they work, where they live. And it's really a kind of a hidden gem when you're trying to build that initial list. Many people running for office, not all, but many people have graduated from some sort of educational institution. If you're running for a larger office, you may have an advanced degree. Those alumni networks are incredible opportunities to share, because whether people support you right on the party line or not, what they will do is they will recognize that they want to learn more about what you're doing because they know you, or know of you, or know someone that knows you. So leverage those alumni networks. The third component is to build a pop-up. If your website doesn't have a pop-up or some opportunity to immediately give your contact information, I know it's annoying, but it works. And that's something that I think is often forgotten about. Step 2 is to groom the list. You need to identify where the signups come from. If you send out an email that asks people to sign up and click a button, then you should have a tracking and a tag in the back end that identifies what email they signed up from. Did they sign up because they were compelled about Veterans Affairs? Did they sign up because they were compelled about paid family medical leave? What was that compelling factor? And that allows you to, on the second step, send those semi-personal messages. Send them to donors. Send them to the people that were the first 100 signups. Send them to the people that connected with you on social media with the subject line, "Thanks for being my friend on Facebook." Those are very corny, but they're a lot better than the alternative, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And always use personal data fields. I'm amazed when people use MailChimp and ActiveCampaign and even Nation Builder, and they forego using the tag first name, tag last name, because they don't have that information. If you don't have that information, then you need to build and you need to work on grooming that list. If you can't send an automated "Hi Maddy," "Hi Brent," then you need to continue to build that, and your list isn't ready to be sent out. Intentional content is very important, and you do not need to do what most political email companies are doing now. Most people shout at you in yellow. If you were signed up for any emails in 2016, this is probably a poison to you, whether you like the candidate or not. They all employed this tactic. And I know it works. I'm not denying that, but there are so many other ways that you can display urgency. The subject line is similar to a cold call. If someone cold calls our office and we can tell that they're a telemarketer, what do? You hang up. If I read your subject line and I know it's bogus, I hang up. I delete it. Sometimes I delete it and I check spam. But that's a really important piece, is that the subject line is where it starts. And then if you have a bad subject line and someone still clicks in, but for some reason sees that yellow demanding action, and maybe I'm sitting at home at night at 7 o'clock and I'm winding down from the day, when I see that, I am immediately filled with urgency. And I don't like that. So I delete it whether I support the candidate or not. And in every email that you send, if you're in nonprofits, if you're in for-profits, if you are in capital campaigns, if you're in political campaigns, you have to only ask for one thing per email. And I know that's hard, especially when it's a big campaign season and you're trying to cram a lot of stuff in. But if you want people to donate, tell them that you want them to donate, tell them why you want them to donate, and give them the option to. If you want them to get involved, ask them to get involved, but don't ask them to also donate. You can put the buttons at the bottom, that's fine, but don't send 7 paragraphs about how they can get involved, and then they can like you on Facebook, and then they can follow you on Twitter, and then they can star or favorite or heart your picture on Instagram. Ask people for one thing, because then when they open that email, they go, check, I did it. They feel like they're a part of the team, and then they delete and they move on. And then they'll open your next email. When they see 75 items on a list, they're going to go, I don't have time for this, and they'll immediately click out. Content delivery is the final piece that I really want to talk about before we open it up for questions. Every major email marketing platform, and even if you're sending it on your own, should employ A/B testing. And if your list is 100 people, you should employ A/B testing even more, because you want to identify what is it that your small group or large group of people likes. A/B testing, for those of you that are not familiar, is a simple idea that you send the same content placed in different areas. So maybe the green logo on the left is in the header in the right, and the subject line is in a different place. Test those things out to the first 20% of your list, see which one wins, then test it again. Nation Builder and MailChimp and ActiveCampaign and all the other ones we haven't mentioned, I'm just listing the ones that our team have used in the past. They all allow this very easily and very inexpensively. Some of them for free or included in the original cost, some of them just for a small additional fee. And then the final piece is to assess. Identify what worked, what didn't work, how much money did you raise, and what are your options moving forward, and how do you ensure that you are identifying the biggest success demographics. Maybe it's that a specific a group of people opened your email the most. Why did they open it? Identify that, reach out to them, and then continue to build that list into the future as you're expanding. So we have 2 final things that I want to share, and then we will open up for questions. If you have questions, there is a chat and Q&A feature, I think you can list them in either place. If you want to access the slides from today, if you go to bcom.io/webinar-v2, so webinar version 2, you should be able to immediately pull up the Google view only slide version. And we feel that anyone should have access to this. None of this is rocket science. As I said, we did take some information from other sources, and that's why we cited those in those areas. And I think that's very important to note, because also with that, you have access to all of the ways in which we're identifying resources too. And if anything, even if you don't want the slides, please take a note of this, and Maddy will post this link in the chat so that everyone can have it that way too. But if nothing else, I would encourage you to also go to the link that we have on the next slide, which you can click on, and we put a digital resource kit together. So that includes email tactics, or email programs, website programs, a bunch of different things that we use. We're not a software company, so we're not hiding anything from you. And I think this list could be very helpful. If you were bored the entire time, I'm sorry, but you could use this for some great things in the future. So with that, we will open up. If anyone has questions, you can raise your hand. You can do the Q&A. You can put it in the chat. We will stay on here for a little bit. You can also chat directly, I believe, with us if you have a question that might be sensitive. We're happy to address that in confidence. I do want to share that we will be doing a specific email fundraising webinar. We will be doing a building a digital advocacy team building a digital advocacy team webinar. And then we're also going to do a webinar later in the year or early at the beginning of next that goes through the platforms and tools that we use, and also the tools that we used to use. And that's something that our company is constantly iterating on, that we are happy to share that. And I believe that all the stuff we shared today is really built in execution. Success is not centered around who has the biggest, baddest tool, but it's centered around how are you using it and how are you crafting your message. So with that, our Twitter handle is below. I listed my email. If you have any questions or comments, we're happy to take those. We'll stay on here for another couple minutes if you need to think on those. But if not, Maddy and I both appreciate you joining us, and we hope that you'll join us on another webinar soon. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.
Does anyone have any questions? Maybe that just means that we had a really good webinar. We're also modest. Thanks, Dan. One of our friends here in Lincoln asked a question if you were running for office and what office I was planning on running for. That is not up for discussion, and it is not planned out. So I personally enjoy sitting here in my office, crafting emails and being a little bit more sneaky and sly. But I'll keep that in mind. If I do run, though, I'll make sure that I send you the first donation email. Excellent. Well, if there are no other questions, all of the communications through the webinar have my email on them. It's also on the slide right now. I'm happy to chat with you one-on-one in a non-salesy fashion about what we do and how we might be able to help you. And I hope that you will join us in our future webinars. Thanks a lot.